Hey everybody, welcome to Big Valley Living. Thank you for joining me. My name is Michelle, and if you've never joined our channel, I want to welcome you. And if you've been here before, thank you very much for joining me for this Canuary 2025. This collaboration has been put on by SuttonsDaze for several years, and I always learn something. So I hope you do the same this year. This year, for my first video, I'm actually going to make chili con carne, and it's actually found in the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning. One thing you're going to notice throughout this collaboration is that the canners who are presenting do safe canning practices. I cannot stress to you enough how important it is to safely can recipes that have been tested, recipes that are approved, because the last thing you want to do is to preserve food in an unsafe manner that could risk your health or the health of those that you love. So I am getting this recipe from page 5-8 of the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning 2023 edition. It is very much like my homemade chili that I make all the time. The nice thing about this is that it's going to be shelf stable, and I'll be able to grab a jar of it off of the shelf anytime I want. Now, these are about the same size as a can of chili that you would buy from a grocery store that are now somewhere between $3.75 and $5 a can. A can. It costs me less to make these. I paid a little bit more for my meat because I get better ingredients than what I know I'm going to get from those companies. I use grass-fed, grass-finished beef, for instance, that's locally raised. If you happen to have a farm and you have your own meat, your own meat processed, good for you. You can use this recipe to can your own chili, and it is so delicious. It smells amazing. So, let me give you a few details here, a little bit of housekeeping. There are two sponsors, SuttonsDaze, who actually is the owner of this collaboration, and Leisa does such a great job every year. She's going to give away a pressure canner as she does every year, but this year she's throwing in a steam canner. Steam canning is a similar method to water bath canning. Any recipe that you would water bath can, you can steam can. You need to follow the instructions on your manufacturer's pan, but it works the same way. Pressure canning is for low acid foods, and your water bath or steam canning is for high acid foods. The second sponsor is 4Jars. 4Jars makes wonderful lids and other products, okay? So they have 3 prizes. They will be giving away a pressure canner, a jar lifter, which is kind of an old-fashioned style jar lifter, and a very generous amount of lids. That's the grand prize. The second prize from 4Jars is going to be lids and a jar lifter, and it's going to be a decent amount. I don't have the exact quantity, but that will be the second prize. The third prize will be lids and a jar lifter, probably just not as many as what you may get in the second place prize. So, what do you need to do to win? Number one, I want you to look for this logo. If you don't see this logo in the thumbnail and or the video, you can feel free to watch that video, but a comment that you leave for that particular video that doesn't have this logo is not going to be entered to win one of the prizes I just mentioned. So make sure to watch for that, okay? It's very important. I would also suggest subscribing to each one of the channels during this collaboration. There are going to be 15 channels, and each channel should be putting out 2 videos. Subscribe to them, because you know what? Everybody follows safe practices. I am going to preach safety all day long because I don't want you to hurt yourself, and I don't want you to endanger the health of your family either. So, leave a thoughtful comment. My suggestion, what did you learn from each video? Drop a comment to that particular channel and let them know what you learned from their video, or let them know what you liked about their recipe, okay? Keep it positive. Keep it focused on that actual video. And on the 31st, Leisa will pick a channel, a date, and then she'll pick a random comment from it. And so the more comments you put on each one of these videos, the better your chances are of winning some really nice prizes that will help you to preserve food for your own family. One thing we want to definitely make sure that we do, you're going to do this before you can, and you're going to do this after you can. Clean your sink. I have a very old sink. It's Harvest Gold, if you must know. So that kind of tells you it was built mid-century in the 1900s. But anyway, you want to make sure that it's very clean. So I've got marks and things like that, but I always clean it very well before I start. You're going to start by washing all your jars and checking all your rims. And that's how you start canning. And then how do you end canning? You're going to fill the sink. You're going to clean the sink, and then you're going to fill it with nice hot sudsy water. I put a tiny bit of vinegar. I put a tiny bit of vinegar in here, and then I'm going to remove my rings, and I am going to clean my jars. There's always going to be a little bit of residue, and whether you see the residue or you don't see the residue, it is there. Do not put it on your shelves without cleaning and thoroughly rinsing your jars. This recipe calls for 3 cups of beans, either pinto or kidney. I used 1.5 cups of each. You can either cover them with cold water and soak overnight for 18 to 24 hours, or you can do what I did. I covered them with boiling water about 3 inches over the top and boiled for 2 full minutes. I then covered, removed from heat, and then I let them soak for 1 hour. Either method, you're going to want to go ahead and rinse those beans and then put cold, fresh water over the top. And at that point, you will want to boil for a full 30 minutes after they come to a boil. I recommend using a timer for this step because you don't want them to be underdone. We have 3 pounds of ground beef now, and what we're going to do is we're going to open it up. I've got 93.7, that's 93% lean, 7% fat. That's a very lean cut of hamburger. I don't need any oil here, but I want you to note that I'm actually putting my meat into what's going to be the final pan that all of the chili is going to be assembled in. I'm not cutting it into pieces that are so small that by the time the chili finishes cooking, you're not going to be able to see the meat. Remember that we're going to pressure can this recipe after constructing the chili for another 75 full minutes. So I don't want to get this meat too small before we put everything together. The nice thing about canning is that you can choose the quality of the meats that you put into your foods. And I really like the ability to do that. This grass-fed, grass-finished beef is absolutely wonderful. While the meat's browning, we can cut up 1.5 cups of fresh onion and 1 cup of peppers of your choice. I chose to use roasted green chilies. We love that flavor profile in our chili. And then what I'm going to do is get some black pepper, and I'm going to go ahead and grind some black pepper into the meat as it's starting to brown. You see how lean that is? We are going to drain the fat off of it so we don't have too much before we add everything else, but this meat is really lean. The goal with the meat is actually to brown it before we add in a few other ingredients. I'm getting my spices ready at this point, and I am going to use chili powder, cumin, garlic powder, and then a little bit more pepper. Right here, I am going to go ahead and just break the hamburger up a little bit more because, of course, we don't want it to be too dense before we put everything together. So it's kind of a fine balance as to how you want your meat to come out when you're finished making your chili. The next ingredient is tomatoes. I ended up using 1 quart of fire roasted crushed tomatoes that were prepared commercially, and then I used my own whole tomatoes. After adding the onion and the green chilies to the chili, I went ahead and I added my tomato products. This is already starting to smell super, super good in the kitchen, you guys. So I mix everything together very well, and what we're going to be doing here is just heating everything through. I neglected to drain the fat from the hamburger before adding the tomato products. So I did my best after bringing it all together to take out a little bit of that liquid. Make sure to take the fat out though before putting in your tomato products because you're going to want all of that liquid. Next, we're going to add our rinsed beans and we're going to get everything together. Now you can see how full this pot of chili is. So I think it's really important to remind you to make sure that you start with a pot that's going to be big enough to hold all of the ingredients and allow it to cook through because you're going to be bringing it up to a boil and then you're going to be simmering it for a while. The recipe calls for 3 to 6 tablespoons of chili powder. I do use chili powder when I make my homemade chili, and with dry spices you can adjust your spice levels. So I chose to use some cumin. It's a mixture of cumin. I used a couple of tablespoons of cumin to start, and then I used regular dark red chili powder. I used about 2 teaspoons of a chipotle chili powder. That's what I put in right here. That just gives it like that little bit of something. It's so good for that smoky flavor. So I'm adding the rest of the regular chili powder, and I don't want to have fresh garlic in here. And it doesn't call for it actually. So I did end up using some dried garlic powder, not granulated garlic, but garlic powder. And this is what made this recipe taste exactly like how we make chili in the Big Valley. Now what we're doing is just putting everything together. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this up to a boil and then reduce to a nice simmer and simmer for a full 5 minutes. At this point, you're going to want to go ahead and start making sure that all of your lids are covered by boiling water. You want to, if you're using 4 jars, and then you're going to want to make sure that you have your jars covered with hot water. Go get your canning pan, make sure that you've prepared that according to manufacturer's instructions. And with that simmer, we are ready to start canning. Welcome to my canning station. I always use a jar to put my funnel on, and then that keeps it clean. I have my cleaned ladle, and I'm going to go ahead and put that into my hot chili pan. I also keep a little bowl on a mat, and that just makes life easy and keeps things from moving around. And then the next thing I want to show you here is a little bowl of white vinegar and some paper towels that I have torn. I like to use a fresh piece of paper towel. This is my magnetic tool that I use to get the lids. I am using 4 jars lids here. Thank you, 4 jars, for sponsoring. A good time to mention that, isn't it? There you go. I prepared 12 pints. After washing everything, I have 12 lids, 12 rings, and 12 pint jars that do not have any cracks or any chips. This recipe says that we'll get 9 pints, but I always do 2 or 3 extra just to be sure. After filling my jars, I ended up with 11 pints. I have put all of the jars into the canner, and now we're at a full steam. I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes, and we need to be rolling like a freight train. You don't want to see any air coming out with all that steam, because what you need to do at this point is to evacuate all of the air from inside of the can. After the 10 minutes elapses, for my altitude, I'm going to put my weighted gauge on. And what I use is 10 pounds of pressure. So what we're going to do is place that over the top. And then once it starts jiggling, we'll start our timer. And that timer will be for 75 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes. Every stove is different, and I know that I'm going to have to adjust my stove to come down a little bit on heat. But you need to do that gradually because that jiggler needs to jiggle 1 to 4 times every single minute. Now that we're jiggling, I'm going to go ahead and hit start on my timer. Don't go too far from your canner because you want to make sure that you keep that heat adjusted. After the time has elapsed, then I'm going to turn off my power. I'm going to leave my canner exactly where it is, And I'm going to use my dial gauge right here so that I can make sure that I have 0 pounds of pressure before I remove my weighted gauge. You need to be sure that there is absolutely no pressure in that canner when you remove that gauge. I'll let that sit for a few minutes, about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to loosen all of the screws that hold it tight. And then I'm going to prop it up and I'm going to let my lid sit there tipped a little bit for, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes, which allows your jars to acclimate to the ambient temperature in the room. So I had 8 pints on the bottom and then I have 3 additional pints on the top. I'm going to use my jar lifter to remove them without tipping the jars at all over to my mat that I have on the counter. Always remove your jars out of the canner and put them onto something, not straight onto a counter, not onto some cold surface, because you don't want your jars to crack. You don't want them to crack for so many reasons, but especially not after all of the hard work that you've put in to making this wonderful, wonderful food to put in your pantry. And there they are, 11 beautiful pints of chili that really and truly tastes like ours. Now you see that there's a little bit of siphoning. You'll see a little bit of grease. That's going to be a little natural because we do have fat in the meat. But I can clearly see pieces of meat in there, which is what we wanted. We want it to be just like homemade chili. So these are going to sit on the mat for a day, at least 18 to 24 hours. As you can see, they are actually still boiling a little bit in there, and they'll continue to do so. All of my jars sealed with the exception of one, and my canning session was pretty late. So I made the decision to take the one unsealed jar and I put that into the refrigerator. I did let it sit for a little while, and then when placing in the refrigerator, I made sure that I put it on a surface. I used a heating pad actually, an oven mitt, and I put it into the refrigerator and I let it just sit until we were ready to eat it. You don't want it to be in the refrigerator very long, and you see there's just like a half a cup back there. That was all that was left of the chili. So I was glad to get a little bit more than the 9 pints that the recipe told me I should expect. And I find that in this book, that is typically the case. So always be prepared with a little bit more. Bloop, 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 bloop. It looks so good. Well, looky, looky, looky. So this is the next day after work. Now I want you to see that there's just the littlest bit of, we had a little bit of siphoning. This is the first time I've ever canned with ground beef at all. So I love the flavor of it. I had a little bit left. But I put some sudsy water in my clean sink. And now what I'm going to do is make sure that I give it a good scrub. Now I put some vinegar in here to cut through the grease. And then I have my canning mat sitting over there on the counter, and you're not going to see that at first. But what I want to do is just make sure that I get everything nice and clean, because this is going to go on my shelf. You see that I've removed my rings. I will clean those later and dry them. But you want to make sure you don't have any residue whatsoever on your cans, jars. And make sure to take special care underneath your lid, okay? So, oh my gosh, this looks like our normal chili. So I'm very excited. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish cleaning all of these. As I remove the rings, let me show you. I'll just put this on for a second. As I remove the rings, every time I can, I'll take the ring off, and they're loose. You don't tighten them down after you pull them out of the canner, okay? And then after they've sealed and you let them sit for 18 to 24 hours, then I give them a tug. I give them a good, strong push from the bottom, because I do not want to risk anybody's health, okay? And that's, at that point, once I'm satisfied with that, that's when I'm going to clean these with nice, hot, soapy water, again, filled with just a little, or maybe quarter cup of vinegar in there to cut through any grease, okay? So there you go. Now once I'm done with this, I'm gonna dry them all off, and I'm gonna label them to put them into my pantry so that we can enjoy this for some nice quick meals, be it for lunch, dinner, or my husband really likes chili dogs. I like chili carrot dogs. If you want to see that, let me know. And just sometimes we just want to have a quick bowl of chili. So I'll see you in a minute.
For sure.
From a can.
Yeah.
From a jar.
Shelf-stable.
Okay. Thank you, honey. Thanks for testing it. Thanks again, Leisa. Thank you, 4 Jars, for sponsoring this. And thank you all for coming and watching me can my first ever load of chili con carne in a safe and delicious manner. Now, be sure to go down to the playlist. I'll put a link to that, and I'll put everybody's channels and dates down below in my description. And make sure to watch all the videos. And please, please, please leave a comment, a thoughtful, original comment in everybody's video so that you have a better chance to win one of these awesome prizes. Thanks to all the collaborators as well. I am in great company. See you later, everybody. Be kind.